Hello, you're welcome. You're welcome onto my channel today, and it gives me great joy to observe you are doing this video. I'm Professor Olayinka Akanle. I'm a lecturer in the university. On this channel, I do a number of stuff, but all I do on this channel, you can cluster into four: sociology, research, relationship, and migration. The video you're viewing today is on my playlist of sociology. Meanwhile, if you have not subscribed to this channel previously, kindly go ahead and click subscribe on your screen right now. Tap subscribe on your screen right now so that you might be alerted every time I drop new video, and so that you might join my family of subscribers. We're building a community of sociologists. Today, I want to be talking about a very phenomenal personality, a very distinguished personality, a very special sociologist of all time, W.E.B. Du Bois. This is a very special person, born in the United States of America in 1868. 1868, he was born and died in 1963. He died in 1963. But within this period of 1868 and 1963, when he lived, he practically made significant change. And that's why it's commonly said that sociologists are change agents. Sociologists in the order of W.E.B. Du Bois and Cyril Mills. I have a video on Cyril Mills. These are sociologists who believe sociologists should go beyond the classroom to be change agents, to be transformative, to be advocates, to be at the forefront of galvanizing what we preach in real life. What we have learned, what we teach, we should bring it practically to practice and make a change. We sociologists should go beyond just studying, theorizing, or teaching. Should go from the classroom to the streets, to the societies, to be active and be practical of all we do. So Du Bois did a lot of this, and that's why I decided to teach W.E.B. Du Bois today. He's a foremost sociologist and also historian at the same time. Du Bois, for the purpose of emphasis, actually was the first African American to earn a PhD from the prestigious Harvard University in the United States. So, and because of his distinguished personality and expertise, Du Bois had different sites. So I will only teach the sites that are very relevant to us today. So I've told you about a little about his history. The first, African American to get PhD from Harvard University, and the PhD, the thesis was very unique at that point in time. It contributed significantly into the understanding of slave trade. Slave trade, the PhD centered on slave trade as it happened then, and the implication, the issues around slave trade, and bringing that to the contemporary experience then of African Americans who, who are commonly viewed from that perspective at that point in time. So the PhD was groundbreaking, and he was an activist. Another thing, aside being an intellectual, he's a sociologist, historian, he's an activist. He was an activist, and this actually is why Du Bois was able to stand out from the crowd of other intellectuals at that point in time. So most of the movement that was started at that point in time, movements, the activism of that time, actually this Du Bois played key role as either one of the founding fathers, one of the prominent leaders, or the editors, like a major editor, like I will show you later on. So he drove change, and he was an elite African American, elite African American at that point in time, because he believed that elite African Americans at that point in time should be well educated and be able to lead other African Americans to the change that they needed. Don't forget, at that point in time, because if you view my video on best ways to understand theory, I told you, or any idea or scholar, I view that videos on this channel, best ways to understand theories, and I mentioned in that place, because you can also view the intellectual contribution of Du Bois from the theoretical perspective of dissensus, of dissonance. Because Du Bois at that point in time was trying to shatter the status quo, was able to deconstruct the intellectual and political hegemony, the social hegemony of his time. So before Du Bois, before his emergence as intellectual, definitive intellectual activist at that point in time, there was an hegemony of African American racist, American exclusion system, that have come to become institutionalized as an hegemony to what you can call consensus functionalism, structural functionalism. But the ideas of Du Bois actually created a dissonance or dissensus in that system to break the existing orthodoxy by saying, wait a minute, racism has got to stop, political exclusion has got to stop. Fundamental racism or exclusion of African Americans have to stop. And he did not only wrote about this, he took active part on the street, moving against this hegemony of racist America. So, and to liberate or to bring the agitation of African Americans to the surface in a way that created a departure, a dissonance, a dissensus in that system. He was able to push the agenda of social and political transformation of that point in time, believing that at least if 10% of African Americans could be educated and they would be able to lead, the 10% was enough to lead the change that they were looking for. Du Bois wrote and acted against racism, and he had advocated for racial equality and racial justice because he experienced right from undergraduate, right from his early days, he experienced massive racism, and he believed as he became educated that this should not continue, that there's a need for agency of change agency to come to the fore, and he was able to exercise his change agency through activism and intellectualism. So, and part of the activity that he engaged in to drive the change was to be a founding member of National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. This is an organization, this NAACP, NAACP, that's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Colored people then, from his own perspective, talk about the African Americans. And beyond that, people that may want to associate with African American identity, across different diasporas, were able to come together under this National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. In 1910, this was formed in 1910, and Du Bois was left, front, and center. He was a prominent founding member. And that's why, he has studied this through slave trade in his PhD. He has experienced this. He has done a lot of this. And so, wait a minute. If nobody's going to, uptake this knowledge, we rather take it up ourselves and drive change. And I think sociologists need to do more of this. And that's why, personally, I'm taking sociology beyond the classroom to teach on this sociology, on this platform. And I share this on my social media platform so people know what sociology is all about and what sociologists can do. So I've taken my sociology beyond the classroom to bring to social media so that knowledge is democratized and is used across board. So advocacy is very important. Intellectualism is very important. But when it comes to advocacy, intellectualism and advocacy come together, it leads to full-blown change. Just like the case of Du Bois, through his advocacy, he was able to achieve full civil rights and political representation of African Americans, full civil rights and political representation of African Americans. These were things that were thought to be practically impossible in those days. But bringing the knowledge to so he was very vibrant, very articulate. Du Bois was very articulate, and he was ready to shatter the myths of racism as given, racism as normal. He shattered that myth and broke the hegemony and created a dissonance, a dissensus in that particular society. So and this led to a lot of change over time. And again, beyond the NAACP, which was founded in 1910, there was another movement. A lot of guys say it was an advocate, and it was a movement. Du Bois was a movement, and that's why we're still teaching Du Bois today. It was a phenomenal. It was unusual, uncommon. It was a movement and create a movement that created a movement. And again, after the NAACP, there was also still another movement called the Niagara movement, for full civil rights of African Americans. So the Niagara movement came again on board, particularly for the full civil rights, to shatter racism, to shatter social exclusion. So the Niagara movement advocated clearly for full civil rights of African Americans and he did a lot of work, wrote. If you look at it, he did in the NAACP. he tried to become the editor. Then knowledge is circulated through print media, most especially. But now we have social media, so we have many other options on different platforms. But then it's more about writing and publishing. So he was able to write through the NACCP. He was writing the monthly magazine of what they call the Crisis. The Crisis became the monthly magazine of NAACP to push out their ideas, their orientations, their agenda, just like the Communist Manifesto of Kamal. So the Crisis became the flagship monthly magazine of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And they were pushing this. So he was the editor. He was very educated. So he was the editor. And, then he wrote, you have compendium of his works. And in 1903, he wrote The Souls of Black Folk. The Souls of Black Folk. This, he wrote about this, to put his ideas to writing, to put his agenda to the front burner, to galvanize, you know, energies around this movement. And he was able to write The Souls of Black Folk in 1903. And but he was so displeased, he was leading the advocacy, leading the activism, in the United States. But it was not, he was very displeased with entrenched racism, social exclusion, in that society. And he wrote about it. And in 1961, he moved to Ghana because he wanted this African identity and wanted to associate with Africa, and he wanted to trace its roots because of the problem of the jeopardy of double consciousness, which I will talk about. A major idea of Du Bois was his idea of double consciousness, and I will talk about this. He was displeased with the double consciousness that he was going through, the African American were going through. So he moved to Ghana in 1961, and he denounced, he removed, and he took away, he renounced his American citizenship and took Ghanaian citizenship in 1961. What a man. What a man. Putting his belief not only into writing, to teaching, but to practice. Renounced, rejected, removed his American citizenship and took up full-fledged Ghanaian citizenship. Renounced American citizenship and took Ghanaian citizenship. So a major also contribution of Du Bois was this idea of double consciousness, which he actually pushed and documented in his book in 1903 of The Souls of Black Folk. For Du Bois, double consciousness means internal conflict of African Americans, the internal identity conflict. You are an African American, you are neither American nor African. So you call African American, but you are in the US, so you're not full-fledged African. Yet you are not accepted as a full-fledged American. So we call this double consciousness, in internal contradiction of identity conflict. You are in the United States where, at that point in time, which was believed to be predominantly white American culture, there was the dominance of white American. Yet to say you are African American, you are neither white nor American. So the identity is in constant state of flow. So internal conflict of African Americans is actually what Du Bois try to put together in this idea of double consciousness. When you looking at oneself from the perspectives of a racist society, viewing of oneself, you look at yourself in your own eyes, at the same time in the eyes of a racist society. So who are you? You say you are black, but this is a racist society that is predominantly white. So white is seen as the real identity, but you are black. So that is in itself, the consciousness is double. You look at yourself in your own eyes and of who you are, yet in the eyes of an inherently racist society of the United States, racist white society. So there is identity conflict and there is identity crisis of who the individual is per time. So this is what is come to be known as the conflict, the crisis of two-ness. Two-ness. T-W-O-ness. N-E-S-S. The conflict and the crisis of two-ness. One person, two identities. Identity of how you see yourself as an individual, as an African American, and identity of an American in a white society. So the person is conscious at two levels, double consciousness. The way individual African American sees himself or herself, and the way is seen by others, and the way he sees himself from the perspective of others. So it's the problem of having more than one identities and a divided sense of self. A divided sense of self, and this created huge difficulty of integrating in that American societies that is dominated by white American culture. Who knows? Perhaps the reason why Du Bois moved to Africa in Ghana at that point in time, so that he can reconcile the tragedy of trueness and double consciousness in that particular society. So there is this perpetual lens of looking at oneself from the eyes of others. It's the perpetual lens. So instead of you defining yourself, I'm Olayinka Akanle. Now I define myself as Olayinka Akanle. If I put myself in that particular context, that means I'm going to be looking at myself from the eyes of others too. This is not supposed to be a problem, but it has significant, social implication and political implication. That means I'm not totally integrated in that society where I'm looking at as an outsider, and where I start to define my identity from the perspectives and eyes from the lens of others. You know what that means. So the perpetual lens of looking at oneself, from the eyes of others is central to the idea of double consciousness. This is a unique idea. And it's to attack this issue of double consciousness that leads to exclusion, lack of social representation, entrenched racism. Is within this broad context that W.E.B. Du Bois, existed and wrote. Unique personality, Du Bois. Welcome to W.E.B. Du Bois. Till I see you in my next video, please subscribe and bye for now.